The God of Jacob sits in judgment. He ordained it as a decree for Joseph when he rose against the land of Egypt. When I heard your voice, I never knew. I removed the burden from your shoulder. Your hands were freed from the load. When you called out in distress, I rescued you. Unseen, I answered you in thunder. I tested your faith in an oasis in the wilderness. Hear this warning, my people. You should only listen. You shall have no strange gods among you. You shall not worship an alien god. I am your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Open your mouth wide and I will fill it. That my people did not listen, Israel will have none of me. So I gave them over to their stubbornness. I let them follow their own inclinations. If only my people would listen to me, if the people of Israel would walk in my ways. Adonai malach ke'ul lavesh, lavesh Adonai osit azar. Avtikon tevel baltimo, nachon kisecha me'az. לעולם אתה, נשאו נהרות אדוני, נשאו נהרות קולם. יישאו נהרות דוחיים מקולות מים רבים. אדירים משברי ים, אדיר במרום אדוני. עדותיך נאמנו מאוד, לביתך נאווה קודש. אדוני לאורך ימים. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, להגיד בבוקר חסדך, ואמונתך בלילות, עלי עשור ועלי נבל, עלי היגיון בכינור, כי שמחתני אדוני בפועלך, במעשה ידיך ארנן. מה גדלו מעשיך אדוני, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. איש פער לא ידע, וכסיל לא יבין, איזה סוד. ורפאים כרשעים כמו עשב, ויציצו כל פעלי אבן. לאיש עמדם עדי עד, ואתה מרום לעולם אדוני. כי הנה אויביך אדוני, כי הנה אויביך יאבדו. יתפרדו כל פעלי אבן, ותרם קרם, קרני בלותי בשמן רענן, ותבטני בשורי. וקמים עלי מרעים, תשמרך אוזני, צדיק כתמר יפרח, כארז בלבנון יזכה. שתולים בבית אדוני, בחצרות אלוהינו יפריחו. עוד ינבון בשיבה, דשנים ורעננים יהיו. להגיד כי אשר אדוני צורי ולא עוולת בו.
Diana here? If you have a cell phone, could I please remind you to turn off the cell phone before we begin our service? This is a little bit unusual for reasons I won't bother you with now. Larry's burial will be later in the week, and details about that will be forthcoming as we know them. And we wouldn't know anything about a Shiva because you don't do Shiva until after the burial. And the last thing I wanted to just tell you is that the family will be hosting a meal of consolation at Glen Meadow immediately following our service. And they, being those thoughtful people, have asked me to remind you that parking at Glen Meadow is not always easy. And maybe you want to leave your car here and carpool with someone. Or I'm told that if you pull into Glen Meadow from Knoll Road, you might find parking. I'll leave that for you to figure out. Our tradition offers us important ways to cope with loss and sadness. One, of course, is we'll lift up Larry's life. And Molly and Harrison will tell us a little bit about their BIPA. And we'll have a flavor of what mattered to Larry. And I'll share with you my reflections both on what I heard from the family and thank God for my own very lovely relationship with Larry and Mitzi. But our tradition also reminds us that there are sacred texts that could be instructive in a moment like this. And we'll use some modern sacred text and some ancient ones. And we're going to start our service with a poem that was set to music. You may have heard it before. It's called Yesh Kochavim, There Are Stars Up Above. Our tradition actually understands that each of us bring light to the world, and that we are God, we bring, our soul is God's light in this world. There's a text from Proverbs, Nishmat Adam Nir Hashem, that the soul of a person is God's candle. To that end, there's a piece called Yesh Kochavim that's almost the opposite of it, which is there are stars up above, and they bring light to our lives, long, long after they've left this world. And as I look in this sanctuary, I think so many of you, unfortunately, have lost people you love. And I know that those people have continued to bring light into your life. And that's really what the words of this very first piece that we're going to hear. And I would be remiss, I just want to introduce Cantor Diana Brewster, who is officiating with me today.
There are stars up above, so far away we only see their light. Long, long after the star itself is gone. And so it is with people that we loved. Their keep shining ever brightly, though their time time with us is done. But the stars that light up the darkest night, these are the lights that guide us as we live our days. These are the ways we remember. We remember as we live our days. These are the ways we remember. We remember. יש כוכבים שאורם מגיע ארצה, רק כאשר הם עצמם עבדו ואינם. יש אנשים שזיו זכרם מאיר, כאשר הם עצמם אינם. עוד בתוכנו אורות אלה המבהיקים בחשכת הליל, הם שמראים לאדם את הדרך, את הדרך. הם שמראים לאדם את הדרך, את הדרך.
The late Rabbi Harold Schulweis wrote this poem that I think is apt for this moment. It's called Holding On and Letting Go. Hold on and let go on the surface of things, contradictory counsel. But one does not negate the other. The two are complementary, dialectical, two sides of one coin. Hold on, death is not the final word, the grave no oblivion. Hold on in Kaddish, Yortzeit, Yisker. No gesture, no kindness, no smile evaporates. Every kindness, every embrace has its afterlife in our minds, our hearts, in our hands. Hold on and let go. Sever the fringes of the talit of the deceased, the knot that binds us to the past. Hold on, not enslaving memory that sells the future to the past, nor recollection that makes us passive, listless, resigned, but memory that releases us for a new life. Return the dust to the earth, not to bury hope, but to resurrect the will to live. Artists, aerialists on a swinging trapeze, letting go of one ring to catch another, to climb to higher heights. Hold on and let go a courageous duality that endows our life with meaning, neither denying the past nor foreclosing the future. Rabbi Schulweis was a congregational rabbi in Los Angeles for many years, and he understood his congregants. And I feel as though he wrote this poem fully understanding how hard it is to let go and how essential it is to hold on. When I think about Larry, I think he lived that. As you'll hear later on, Larry didn't get to be the athlete that he might have could have been, and he never complained about it. He loved his father, he understood the circumstances, and he did what he was called upon. And he says, it's a good thing, because if I had taken that path, I might not have met Mitzi. And so it was all for the good. Larry modeled for each and every one of us, hold on and let go. As I was picking the poem I wanted to share, I kind of had this vision of Larry as an aerialist, letting go and holding on. And in his younger years, he actually had the physical prowess. He could have done that with ease, I am 100% certain. As I said, there are ancient and modern texts that can be a source of comfort or guidance in this moment. And I turn now to Psalm 23. Cantor Brewster will sing it for us in just a moment. And I want to say what Psalm 23 reminds us is that God cares, is that we're not alone. Psalm 23 also, at the very end, talks about living in God's house forever. And I want to share with you a very foundational Jewish belief that is a great sense of comfort. And that is that Larry's soul is reunited with Charlie's, with his mom and dad, with all those people. And he was such a people person, he lost a lot of people who he loved. One message of our tradition is that when somebody dies, all the stuff of a failing body is lifted, and a precious soul leaves this world and goes to the next. And I hope that's a source of comfort, not that it is easy to let go, but that it is comforting for me to imagine that an aging, failing body is no longer hindering our Larry. I'll invite Cantor to come up.
Adonai ro'i la'echsan bin od deshe yarbitzeni al mei menuchot Nafshi yeshuvev, yeshuvev, yancheni b'magelei tzedek, yancheni b'magelei tzedek, למען ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, כל ימי חיי. ושבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. אדוני רואי לא אחסר, אדוני רואי לא אחסר.
The psalmist wrote, Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want, giving me repose in green meadows, leading me beside the still waters to revive my spirit, guiding me on the right path, for that is God's essence. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your staff, your rod comfort me. You prepare a banquet for me in the presence of my foes. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness shall be my portion all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever. At this point, I would like to invite Molly and Harrison to join me to share some reflections.
It's just one copy. This is the whole thing. Yeah. We're just gonna have to stay coordinated. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and traveling here. We love you all and appreciate your presence. I'm Molly Mackler. I'm Larry's granddaughter.
And I'm Harrison Mackler, Larry's grandson.
So one of the greatest privileges of our lives is to stand here today and honor our grandfather, surrounded by this incredible gathering, community of people who loved him so deeply. To speak about him in this temple with all of you who knew his larger-than-life heart and presence feels like the right way to carry forward the story of a man whose love changed all of us and how he would have wanted it to be done.
Today we gather for a hesped, the Jewish tradition of lifting up the truth of a life and honoring its goodness as a soul returns to God. This vibrant, laughing, compassionate soul belongs to Lawrence Marvin Mackler, Larry to many, and to many of us simply, Bipa. For nearly 98 years, he lived as a force of kindness, conviction, humor, loyalty, and devotion.
Larry embodied hesed, loving kindness in its most natural, instinctive form. He noticed people. He remembered people. He cared so fully that being with him felt like being truly seen. He loved everyone who would give him even a few minutes of their time. He lived the Jewish value of hakarat hatov, recognizing the good. This is part of what kept his life so good for so long. He didn't believe in second chances. He believed in 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th chances.
Bipa grew up in a hardworking, second-generation Jewish family that proudly ran Mackler's Market in Springfield, just down this road. He grew up with his siblings, Mickey, Leslie, Lucille, and of course his identical twin, Charlie, his lifelong companion in shadow. He was never lonesome because he always had his brother.
I want to specifically note that he adored and admired his mother, Sadie, her intelligence, business sense, compassion, and from her he learned to be conscious of all people, conscious of their feelings, and I think also a profound respect for all women. Bipa did make a point to educate us about the anti-Semitism that he and Charlie faced, the kind that shapes children early and stays with them forever. It is a true story, I think. I know that historically it matches up, that he and Charlie threw rocks at the Hindenburg on the playground in 1936 when it passed over Springfield. They met it head on, side by side throughout their lives, choosing pride and courage even when it came at a cost. Larry worked hard his entire life. He built a home and provided for his family side by side with his beloved Mitzi, her long and meaningful teaching career, and his decades at Forest Insurance Agency. He loved the work because he loved the people, not only his colleagues who he loved deeply and dearly, but his customers too. He wanted to protect them, to guide them, and to make sure that they were truly cared for. Even into his 90s, he remembered customers by name and told us of the ones he wished had taken his advice before hardship came. He worked not hard just professionally, but in the quiet, essential ways, keeping a home warm, keeping a family connected, and nurturing his marriage to Mitzi as the unwavering center of his world.
Amidst all the hard work, Larry and Mitzi made time to see the world together. They traveled as much as they possibly could, seeking food, art, music, and experiences that expanded their lives in ways they treasured. They delighted in culture, in new places and adventures, shared hand in hand. Travel was part of their love story, a way they kept learning and discovering life together.
Now about that love story. I listened to some recordings I'd taken during a visit a few years ago, and one recording begins with Bipa saying, "The best thing that ever happened to me was meeting your grandmother." They didn't know I was recording, and this is something he would say at any point, out of the blue, any day. But the story goes, at least his version, she was 15, walking down the stairs, and he thought, where did she come from? He even remembered and told me about their first kiss. She was recovering in bed from a cold, and Nana, Grandma's beloved mother, to his surprise, let him in her room. In those days, that was not common. He leaned down and he kissed her for the first time. He laughed with delight as he told me the story. When I asked if Nana always liked him, he said, "Oh, she loved me. And her grandmother loved me too." Of course they did.
Larry and Mitzi were married over 75 years, something reached by only 0.0016% of American couples. That's roughly the same odds as being struck by lightning. Not once, but twice. Their love was rare. It was sacred. It is unforgettable, and may that shape the way we all love one another. Larry and Mitzi were always holding hands.
I remember being a little kid in the back seat of their car, back when they had one of the early car phones, which I thought was very fancy. Their hands were intertwined, resting on the center console as Bipa drove, and I would watch them adoringly. Meanwhile, the rearview mirror was cranked so he could look right at me, which makes it a genuine miracle that we survived our special yet frequent day trips. His other great love story was with his twin brother, Charlie. In basketball, Charlie was the ringer. Bipa said, when Charlie got hot, no one could stop him. Larry was the glue, the defensive force, and my dad has his own comments on this, but because I wasn't there. But in football, Charlie was the quarterback, and Larry was the wide receiver. And so Bipa just mentioned their timing was perfect, only the kind that twins could pull off. They played in Jewish leagues and basically every single league they could outside of high school, which their father did not let them play in, but we're not talking about that right now. So people actually bet on those games, and not only just on those games, but on those twins. And Bipa would always tell us, and many of you know this story, that when Charlie would foul out, because he often did, they would switch jerseys so Charlie could go back in and score. But Larry's favorite sports memory of his own was exactly a 410-foot home run over the center field wall for the Jewish war veterans team. He never missed a single one of my father's high school games, and he never missed a single one of mine. He had a pink, tattered, unlimited entry pass that I'm pretty sure Longmeadow High School printed out just for him. He kept one of my college games on his TiVo for a decade after no one else owned a TiVo. For years, he refused to upgrade his completely obsolete television for this very reason. Sports weren't just games to him. They were connection, pride, joy. A way of showing up, a way of saying, I'm here for you, I see you, I love you. You want me to do that? Okay.
Bipa lived life out loud. He was a walking joke book. He loved his jokes so much that in many cases, he couldn't even get to the punchline. I think you all remember this, because he was laughing too hard at how funny the joke was by then.
He also sang constantly. Real songs, made-up songs, 5-second masterpieces. Please note that he was not a good singer by any stretch of the imagination. Both my father and I inherited the jingle writing and poor singing ability from him, and we just keep doing it anyway like he did. He called every woman darling, and when I answered the phone, without fail, he'd say, is this my beautiful, amazing, darling granddaughter? And a lot of the young women and every woman in his life, he addressed them the same way, as flowery and poetically as he possibly could. At almost anything we said in response, even my and Harrison's signature response to answering the phone, beep, 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 he would laugh for really almost 20 seconds straight, maniacally and so happily, and you could just feel that he was just laughing because he loved us so much and loved hearing our voices. I think the thing that I'm grieving most so early on is the absence of that laugh.
He made friends with everyone. At the Big Y grocery store, the hardware store, even the busy sidewalk in front of their home on William Street. He should have run for mayor, but he didn't need to, because in some ways he already was. Of course, we can't speak of his unwavering devotion without mentioning his relationship with Diet Coke. There were actually pallets worth of Diet Coke in their garage. Actually, a study came out recently talking about the correlation between Diet Coke and lifespan, and Bipa didn't agree with the answer. So he actually called Coca-Cola customer service and told the representative over the phone that he was an outlier to that study. Even in comfort care, he said, no water, Diet Coke. But in all seriousness, luckily for the two of us, he bragged about me and Molly every chance he got. He and my grandma did not miss a single significant event in either of our lives. As the only grandchildren, we appreciated the shrine-like collections that he and grandma built about us in their homes. I don't know if any grandparents have ever shown their pride more openly than our grandparents did for us.
Bipa would literally parade us around to anyone who would listen to him. At McDonald's, he would announce he needed 2 cups of pickles for Molly, as if everyone working at McDonald's should already know who I was. He was the exact same way with his beloved Harrison. Larry was one of, if not the last remaining man in an impressive collection of deeply meaningful friendships and really chosen family that he and Mitzi poured so much of their energy and lives into nurturing and keeping so strong for well over half a century. There are too many to name, but I do want to mention Larry and Mitzi's lifelong friend Mimi and the Herschelts, especially Amy, who are true family to us.
He adored Grandma's sister Harriet and her husband Peter. He adored all of his nieces and nephews, Jennifer, Deb, Rebecca, and Michael, their significant others, and their children, and now his great-grandniece, Penelope Jane. He also loved his siblings' children so much. He loved Darren, our mother, so very much. She cared for him and took care of him, made him pigs in a blanket, and deviled eggs, his favorites, alongside my father for all these years in Longmeadow. He loved Molly's wife, Lauren, madly, for every good reason, whose family traveled from Florida and New York to sit with us today. And he also loved Alex. His children, Linda, Philip, and Robert, were everything to him. Robert and Jane have sent their beautiful words and their love from afar. Phil and Linda have embodied all of the values Beepa and Grandma imparted on them, including devotion to family, compassion, and generosity. Thanks so much, Dad and Linda, for taking care of your father and mother with unconditional love and, frankly, incredible stamina and heart.
Harrison and I had the pleasure of sleeping over at their house on William Street often. It was our special place to relax, be doted on, get our homework done. Harrison more easily than I most of the time. Freely play, and with our fun and happy grandparents. I think of Beepa every time I shake salt, black pepper, and his signature red pepper on my eggs. He would make us a full breakfast or lunch and bring it into the room where we were comfortable and presented it to us on a tray every time. He made me warm milk before bed and would bring it in to me in a special mug, usually from Tanglewood. There was a maternal type of energy in his big, strong, handsome body.
Like Molly said, we spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house when we were growing up. It was just 5 minutes away. I remember the Hershey's chocolate syrup and Hood milk he'd stir together for me, and the Progresso soup and SpaghettiOs he'd heat up for me any time of day. I was a very picky eater as a child, but he always made sure I had plenty of mashed potatoes and gravy at Thanksgiving, because there's no chance I was touching that green bean casserole. When I spoke to him the night before he passed, he had just finished his largest meal in about 2 weeks, mashed potatoes. He told me he'd make sure he got me some. When I stayed at their house, I slept under a special blanket with an eagle on it that Beepa would tuck around me. And I'd fall asleep staring at a large modern art painting, one I now have hanging above my bed in Chicago. I remember him and my grandma taking us to Forest Park to feed the ducks, white bread, and even to see Bill Clinton speak in Springfield in 1996, just 2 days before he won re-election. He would go to the ends of the earth, or at least to Holyoke, to get me my collectibles, like the April O'Neil Ninja Turtle action figure and Beanie Babies. He would hug us tightly as we slept in his big t-shirts, his dancing shirts, as we called them, and to tell us how much he loved us and that he couldn't even stand how much he loved us. He explicitly loved all kinds of love, and it didn't matter to him who loved who.
Beepa cared through consistency, through handwritten cards, through birthdays remembered, and through phone calls. He expected the same back. But this is just because he knew no other way. He was stubborn in many ways, but the greatest of all ways was that he was going to absolutely make sure that he knew that he cared about you. One of the greatest gifts of my life was being able to be with him on his last night. We were able to see his humor and incredible sweetness before he fell asleep. We did a lot of funny shticks to get him to wake up a bit, and they worked. He knew and understood everything we were saying about how loved he is, especially by Mitzi, and about how proud of him we are, about how Alabama was losing, and that the Patriots won and were now 9-2. When we told him that we were going to give him a kiss on his head, sometimes he'd say very clearly, "Thank you." After I'd rub his neck, which he always asked many of us to do, and I asked, "Does it feel okay?" he said, "Unbelievable." When the nurses said they'd be back soon, he would say, "Don't be gone too long." His charming, flirty sense of self, his charming, flirty self until the end. As Lauren and I attempted to leave him to sleep around 2 a.m., he said something we couldn't immediately make out. He said, I love, and Lauren made out the last word, attention. It was funny, but it was also deeply him, just wanting a loved one to stay, comforting him. And so I snuggled up to his side, my head on his arm, and held his hand as he drifted into his last sleep.
Thank you to Rabbi Amy Walk and her congregation for holding our grandparents in such a meaningful community and genuine, enduring care. If each of us were even half as kind as Larry was, we could create a ripple of tikkun olam, repairing the world.
Everyone, remember that Larry measured success by one thing: how many people he loved and how well he loved them. Judaism teaches that a soul continues through mitzvot, the good we do in their name. May we honor Larry every day by devoting our whole hearts to the people around us, by bringing sincerity and joy to each interaction, and by always rooting for and caring about the underdog. Thank you.
Thank you, Harrison and Molly, for those really beautiful reflections. Larry was born in Springfield on March 19, 1928. His parents, Harry and Sadie, had a large family. He had two older brothers, Mickey and Leslie, and of course, Charlie, his twin brother. By 40 minutes, Charlie was older. And then there was Lucille. Larry grew up not so far from here. His father owned Mackler's Market on Dickinson Street. Larry's childhood home was observant. He grew up at the Kadima. The rhythm of Larry's childhood home was Jewish. The holidays were observed, Shabbat was celebrated, Kashrut was observed. Larry and his twin brother Charlie were always close. It's interesting because in this week's Torah portion, we read about the first set of twins in human history, Jacob and Esau. These boys, these twins, were not so close. In fact, they didn't get along at all. They competed for their parents' love and were jealous of each other. Charlie and Larry could not be more different. These twin brothers stuck together. They were handsome, tall, and athletic. You name the sport, baseball, football, basketball, the boys played and they were good. They played in every possible league for every possible sport. The Mackler family lore is that sports was super important to both Larry and Charlie. And I'm told that on one Yom Kippur, Larry and Charlie went to shul in the morning, but they had hid their jerseys in the bushes, and after morning services and before Ne'ilah, they collected their jerseys and went to play in a game. I'm guessing they were back for Ne'ilah as well, but I don't know. While Larry never complained about his childhood, Larry carried some real responsibilities from a very early age. Larry and his brother Charlie worked at Mackler's Market all the time. In fact, their father didn't allow them to play sports in high school because it took too much time, and Harry needed the boys in the store. In addition to working in the store, Larry had household responsibilities. His mother, Sadie, was not a well woman, and so for some time he also helped his father with household chores. While Larry carried these responsibilities from a young age, he never complained. He felt blessed to have a family of origin with so much love. So many times he told me about his parents, and especially his mom. As I said already, the good thing about Larry not playing college sports is that he went to technical high school and then to AIC, and it was in those years that Larry met Mitzi Colton. There are so many stories about how Larry and Mitzi met. I just heard a third. But the story I recall hearing is that Larry and his friend Merwin Rubin were on a double date. And according to Larry, from the minute he laid eyes on Mitzi, it was love at first sight. But another version of this story is that 2 years later, Larry and Mitzi were at a party, and from there, the rest is history. Mitzi was Larry's bride since September 3rd, 1950. Well, maybe since July 13th, 1950. That's a whole other thing. When I would visit Mitzi and Larry in their home on William Street, I remember looking through their wedding album and seeing Mitzi's beautiful dress. We know for sure that she wore that dress on September 3rd, 1950. And this was a dress that was borrowed by several dear friends who were lifelong in so many ways. When Larry and Mitzi were married, Mitzi transferred from UMass to AIC. And by the time she graduated, she was pregnant with Robert. At first, Mitzi and Larry lived on Dickinson Street, and in 1957, they moved to Viscount Street in Longmeadow, and they were in that home until 1978, when they moved to William Street. And that was the home they were in until they moved to Glen Meadow in 2023. Mitzi and Larry had 3 children, Robert, who's married to Jane, who are with us in spirit, Linda, and Phil, who is married to Darren. And of course, they had Molly and Harrison. As you have heard, Larry and Mitzi lived 2 miles away from Molly and Harrison, and they were totally devoted to their grandchildren. I remember when I first arrived, Larry would mail me articles from the newspaper if they included mention of Harrison or Molly. In those years here, I didn't realize quite how important sports was in the town, but I learned. Mitzi and Larry were totally committed to attending games, banquets, actually practices too. The real essence is, as we have learned, Larry and Mitzi were totally devoted to Harrison and Molly. Over the years, I got to know Molly and Harrison long before I ever met them. Larry and Mitzi loved to tell me stories about their wonderful grandchildren. Larry didn't brag, he was simply sharing his nachas with me, and I could tell the difference. Larry was an insurance salesman. For most of his career, he worked at Forest Insurance. Actually, if you know Larry, you know he could sell someone the Brooklyn Bridge if he had wanted to. Larry was a people person. He took a real interest in people. He loved to hear their story, and he actually remembered their stories. Larry didn't make an effort to do this. It was just natural because he cared so much about whoever he was talking to. I want to digress for a moment and share a personal story because it's about how Larry cared for the people around him. Larry didn't really know my 3 children, but not only did Larry always ask about them, he remembered where they were and what they were up to. When my husband Mark moved here in 2022, Mark was hospitalized for a short time. Larry had not yet met Mark, although he was at our Ufruf and saw him from a distance. And yet one afternoon when I visited Mitzi and Larry in their home on William Street, Larry took out $15 from his wallet and he asked me to do him a favor. He said, "Would you please go buy some ice cream for Mark? I want to welcome him here." That was Larry, always extending gestures of friendship and care. Molly tells me that in Larry's later years, he would sometimes think about former customers who didn't purchase the right policy. He worried for those former customers, and he felt badly. As an insurance salesman, Larry saw his customer, and he sold them what they needed, or he tried to. He understood a basic rule: serve the person in front of you, and over time, your reputation will grow and you will be rewarded. After retiring from the insurance business, Larry worked for a little more than a decade as a substitute teacher in the Springfield Public School. I have to admit, I was a little surprised to find out it was for the kindergarten and first grade, because I saw this big guy going into the classroom with these little children, but I am 100% sure that Larry connected with them. I could see it. I couldn't see Larry sitting on those chairs, but I can see that Larry was gentle and tender and playful and funny, and that the young children in those classes must have loved when Mr. Mackler walked into their classroom. Over the years, Larry and Mitzi did quite a bit of traveling. Larry didn't love to fly, so many of the vacations were more regional, but they did also see much of the world, and in each place, they purchased a meaningful souvenir to remind them of their travels. Larry and Mitzi loved traveling because it was an opportunity to learn and explore. Larry was, and Mitzi is, smart, curious, eager to learn. Larry was an intellectual. He came off as a jokester, but he was an intellectual. And I also know that Larry and Mitzi loved being at home and just sitting together and watching television. Whether they were on Dickinson Street or Viscount Road, William Street or Glen Meadow, they had each other and they were enveloped by deep friendships and extraordinary family. And everything else was just a wonderful bonus. Larry was compassionate, kind, wise, witty, handsome, warm, and wholesome. He was gracious and supportive, and he had a really good heart. Because Larry was such a people person, it makes sense that in many ways, Larry was the patriarch, not only of the Mackler family, but of the Colton family as well. Larry kept the families connected, so much so that Linda recalls how friends didn't understand why Larry was organizing rides for members of his family to attend Mitzi's sister's family's simchas. It was all a bit confusing. There is just one other word that I want to share about Larry, and that is respectful. Just a while back, you talked about how Larry would often call women darling. Do you know he never called me darling? The only word Larry ever called me was rabbi. He understood and had a deep respect. And you might think that a man his age would be dismissive of a woman rabbi, because when he was a boy, that wasn't part of the story. I can hear Larry saying rabbi and only rabbi. Larry had strong opinions, and he most definitely shared what was on his mind. And he tried hard to convince you that he was right. Linda put it so well when she said, Dad was just not the kind of guy who could agree to disagree. Larry loved to tell a good joke. Whenever I would visit Larry, he was sure to tell me a joke, and at some point he even began lending me books of jokes. No one really knows when or how Larry became the jokester that he was. Some suspect that it all began because he and Charlie were identical twins, and yet they were different. As Harrison and Molly said, they could look at pictures of the identical twin brothers and look at their eyes and immediately know and recognize their bipa. It sounds like in their younger years, Charlie and Larry enjoyed making people's jaw drop, as the two loved to confuse the folks around them. One delightful story: Charlie was in the hospital and he was pretty sick. The nurse didn't see Larry walk into the room to visit his brother, But when he left, Larry turned to the nurse and said, "I'm feeling so much better. I think I'll go home and get a good night's rest." Imagine that poor nurse. Judaism was always important to Larry. As I mentioned, Larry grew up in a traditional home and his family attended the Kadima. When he married Mitzi, they stayed at the Kadima for some time. But eventually, Mitzi wanted an adult bat mitzvah, and they wanted a shul with family pews. And so the Temple Bethel became home for Larry and Mitzi. They loved the shul. They loved coming to services. They loved sitting and visiting with fellow congregants during Kiddush lunch. These past few years, Larry would always tell me just how much he missed the Temple Bethel and how much he loved our congregation. And so that is where I will choose to conclude, with the image of a man who was, in many ways, just a loving and endearing man with unparalleled empathy, with endless jokes, with a commitment and a pride in his family and his community, and a heart as good as gold. Larry Mackler loved his life, and to those in his life, he gave so much love, for which we give our thanks. May he rest, relieved of earthly worries, and may we treasure and expand upon the many blessings which he gave and the many lessons he offered to his beloved wife, children, grandchildren, countless souls, and beyond his immediate family, and most certainly to our community. Zecher Tzadik Livracha, may the precious soul of this wonderful man be a blessing. I want to conclude our service with the singing of the El Malei Rachamim and the Hashkivenu. The El Malei Rachamim is a prayer in which we turn to God and we ask God to watch over Larry's precious soul. If you're able, I invite you to please rise.
במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים, את נשמת לזר משה בן הרש, שהלך לעולמו בעבור שאנחנו מתפללים בעד הזכירת נשמתו. בגן עדן תהא מנוחתו, לכן בעל הרחמים יסירהו בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, ויצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו. ינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן.
Elmalei Rachamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure. To the precious soul of Lawrence Marvin Mackler, the son of Harry and Sadie. Dear God, we ask that Larry find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. Please be seated. I had asked the cantor to prepare the Hashkivenu for us. We started our service talking about the stars that continue to light up our life. But it takes a while to experience the light of those stars. And I'm mindful, especially for you, Mitzi, how dark the world feels now. And in this darkness, we turn to God and say, we ask God to look after you and protect you and hold you. And all of us commit to doing that because everyone in this room loves you.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom, v'hamidenu malkeinu l'chaim, ufros aleinu sukat shelomecha, v'taknenu be'etza tova milefanecha, v'hoshienu leman shemecha.
Please rise if you're able.